Right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's meeting of Melton Borough Council Scrutiny Committee. Just my opening comment is this is not a Christmas jumper. The Christmas jumper will come out next week in the appropriate month, for next week's meeting. Okay, I'm going to change the script I've been given because this one says we won't be using the audio-visual system. Just remind you, we will be using the audio-visual system this evening. However, it will be the meeting will be recorded and is available to watch online to members of the public. Members are asked to physically raise their hands in the usual way to indicate they wish to speak. Please switch mobile phones to silent. Should you need to leave the room during the meeting, unless it's an emergency evacuation when emergency exits should be used, please use the marked exit and entrance. I'll just provide a reminder of the evacuation procedure. In the event of having to evacuate the council chamber, please leave by the emergency exit. Please assemble at the far side of the front car park nearest the park entrance. Officers will be on hand to assist persons who require any assistance. Public recording of the meeting. There is legislation that allows the public to film, record or use social media at a council meeting. This must not be disruptive to the good order of the meeting, nor include any filming or recording of the public seating area. Okay, move on to the agenda proper. And the first item is apologies for absence. Do we have any, Adam?
Yes, we do. We have apologies from councillors Chubb and Pritchett.
Thank you. Minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of September 2024, which have been circulated. And I presume all members have read them. Do I have a proposer to accept those minutes? Councillor Thwaites, seconded. Councillor Sharp. Can we just have a show of hands to accept the minutes, please? Thank you. If you weren't here, apparently under the rules you can vote even if you weren't here. But I think it's proper not to. Okay. Declarations of, oh, sorry, Councillor Gordon. Yeah, that was just, give me a chance to say it. I appreciate your enthusiasm for the item. I'll just invite members who wish to do so to make declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda for this meeting. Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, it's not going to make any difference to this meeting, but I just want to put it out there that I am a council tenant.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you. But that doesn't raise any issue at all with the business for this meeting, does it?
No, but you're not making any decisions, so yeah. No, it doesn't.
Yeah. Okay. Any other declarations of interest? Okay, we move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is the review of the forward plan. As always, that's attached to the papers, and it's an opportunity if every member wishes to raise an issue in the forward plan that's been circulated, please do so. Councillor Lumley.
Is Chair, just a quick one. Because last few months I've been involved with other councillors with just work on improving antisocial behaviour outcomes, sort of like bus shelter, town centres improvement and car parking, car park general maintenance, country park car park maintenance. Could they be actually noted on here that they are being looked into, they are under review, or do we just say that that work's being done and that's it? Just while we're here, that was all.
Well, I think the forward plan, which is constantly updated, is there to show what's in the pipeline, in a sense. So it's to comment on that, but if Michelle would like to.
Yeah, no problem. So the forward plan is a record of key decisions to be taken by the Cabinet. Those items would be operational matters, so they wouldn't be appropriate for them to be included. What we do have is for your committee meeting next week, a focus on the cleaner, greener Melton and that collaboration around environmental quality. So you'll be able to ask any specific questions there. One of the things that report will focus on is the need to have some way of triaging requests for things, because it's not possible to service all of those requests that might come through. But I would suggest that we deal with it as part of that item if possible. Not appropriate for the forward plan. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You're happy with that? Yeah, okay. Right, any other items to raise under the forward plan? No? Right, item 5 is the mid-year review of the scrutiny work programme. which I'm just quickly scrolling round to. I'd like to, before inviting any comments from members, I'd like to flag up a couple of issues. One is that being slow coming up. We have an item on the plan for a look at the cyber policy, or the cyber protection policy for the council. It has been suggested, or I've had it suggested to me, that it would be better if that was dealt with by way of a workshop rather than as a committee reading. There's a couple of reasons for that. I mean, one is, inevitably, if we're reviewing the cyber protection policy for the council, there may well be items in that we don't want to be discussing. Well, we'd have to go into a private session, because if we've got great ideas how to protect our cyber security, we don't want to publicly tell all the cyber criminals out there that it's there. So that might be better dealt with in a workshop. But also, because of the sort of detail that may be involved, I think we've found, and a lot of committee members have reflected this back to me, that the workshop is a better mechanism for dealing with that sort of business. So would the committee agree to the cyber protection being dealt with in the workshop rather than at that committee meeting? We'll just have a quick show of hands, just so it's formal. Thank you. And on the back of that obviously clears up a slot in March. And I've had some discussions, and it reflects on something that's been in the work programme before, but we agreed to defer it as it wasn't seen as high on the list of priorities at the time. But I've actually identified that the issue of homelessness, the landscape on homelessness, has changed over the last 6 to 12 months, and it's become much more of an issue for the council. And therefore, I have asked the director if we could actually have that as an item in March, and that's been agreed. And I'll just turn over to you, Michelle. We've done some initial scoping on what that item would be about.
Okay, thank you. So if you just bear with me, I'll sort of take you through the remit there. So I think previously you have considered having homelessness strategy as part of your work programme, and we've had assurance that the homelessness strategy is fit for purpose and and is a document that can meet our legal requirements. But this is about the operational management of demand and some of those challenges. So obviously, as part of this mid-year review, it's a really good time to reflect on emerging pressures and demands, not just for this council, but for the wider sector. And one of those is around homelessness demand, and particularly the need for and the use of temporary accommodation and the associated costs. It is putting pressure on council budgets, and there will be a need in discussion with the chair and vice chair to scrutinise how those risks are being managed, how they're being mitigated in real time, but also how we future-proof our service so that we can meet future requirements without having to default to expensive options such as bed and breakfast, which are really expensive per night. Not just that, but making sure that we have the right supply of homes to move people onto in the long term, not just a home, but a suitable and appropriate home. So with that in mind, it's a really live issue for the sector. There are councils that have found themselves in real financial difficulty as a result of homelessness demand, and it is a pressure for all councils. Certainly in Leicestershire, there are lots of papers circulating about the pressures that are being felt, hence it being recommended for consideration by the committee. It is also something that we are actively managing through our risk register, so it feels very timely and relevant if you chose to have that as part of your work programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Are there any comments members of the committee wish to make on that one? So can I just get an indication by show of hands if people are happy for that to be included for March? Thank you. And then one final item from me on the work programme. You'll know that we do have as one of our items looking at the waste strategy and contract delivery, and the way in which we propose we deal with that was firstly to have an initial workshop, and then to have a follow-up where the provider would attend and have an opportunity to be questioned and to speak with committee members. Just to update you, we're now looking at holding that workshop in the week commencing the 6th of January. The final date hasn't yet been determined, but it would be sometime in that week, hopefully. Okay. Right. Are there any items other committee members wish to raise regarding the work programme? No. No, thank you. Microphone off rather than on. We'll move on to item 6, which is social housing allocation. And the Assistant Director for Customers and Communities and the Strategic Lead for Supporting Communities will introduce the report and deliver a presentation. Is that going to be Aisha straight off? So over to you, Aisha.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll be providing a brief introduction to the session and to the team, and then the Strategic Lead for Housing Options and Homelessness will walk through the bulk of the report. So this is to provide Scrutiny with an overview on how social housing allocation service is delivered in Melton. We've included hopefully some useful data and statistics for you, and there will be an opportunity to review the proposed changes to the Council's allocations policy. And as such, within there, we've included, as part of the appendices, the draft policy and summary of existing of changes to the existing policy as well. Within the report, on the presentation, sorry, next slide, Adam. Oh, yourself. So there's the team names are on there. They're in the report as well. Rachel is the strategic lead for the team, manages quite a diverse mix of skills and experience within the team. And the details are on there. Housing options officers are responsible for delivering the council's homelessness statutory duties. They have quite as I say, a diverse mix of skills and experience, and it is a kind of deliberate recruitment in terms of our direction of travel that we wanted within that team, that diverse mix, because alleviating a person's homelessness situation and supporting them to a sustainable solution is not just a housing matter. It needs an understanding of wider complexities, root causes, and the ability to balance statutory requirements with empathy and the use of reason and discretion. So I just wanted to provide some assurance and confidence that we have a good balance of the experience and backgrounds that are required within the team. And now I'm going to hand over to Rachel to talk through the rest of the report.
Thank you. So what we've tried to summarise is the main responsibilities that are covered by not only social housing allocations, but by the housing options team. So it's split into two main areas, which is housing register and homelessness. So the housing register is, as it says, registering of applications for the housing register, the customer support associated with that, doing the checks on applications to confirm eligibility for the register that they are allowed to be on there, the advertising of property, council-owned and housing association registered provider properties, the shortlisting of properties, and the update and maintenance of the website. With homelessness, we are responding to presentations of people facing homelessness, making safeguarding referrals for our complex customers, referrals to supported accommodation, and leading multi-agency meetings to resolve homelessness. It is liaising with letting agents and private landlords, so in that private sector, to secure existing or new properties, and leading investigations to potential incidents of intentionally homeless, no priority need, and eligibility. Complex approaches such as domestic abuse and modern slavery are all part of the everyday cases that we deal with. So what I've tried to do is on this presentation is just put some facts and figures about where we are at the moment. So this the data that we've got is of the 18th of October. So I appreciate that's 6 weeks out of date now, but as of the 18th of October, there were 763 people on the housing register, and you can see how they are split into bands and priority. So people will talk about what waiting time is, how long are people waiting on the register. The parts that we should really be focusing on are those in a priority band, because they're the ones that have to bid for properties. They're the ones that are in the most need and have deemed to be in the most need. The people that are in a low, medium, or high, they're the ones that maybe have got a need for moving but aren't urgent. So it's the ones that are waiting in a priority. And as you can see, as of the 18th of October, we had 35 households in a priority band across all bedroom requirements. So the allocations policy states that applications will be processed within 4 to 6 weeks. We're currently doing it at 11 days. Current average figures for applications are, we have 66 lodged per month. That's not made live, that's lodged. That's new applications made live per month is 18, and rejected applications on eligibility are 15. Some applications are cancelled if a customer has not provided all the information required or the application is incomplete. Sometimes a customer can lodge an application, we go back to it, ask them for documentation, and they don't come back to us, but it's that work that's going in to do that. So the reasons for rejection of applications, I've put there, 24 people came to us between January 23 and October 18th, 24, 336 applications were rejected. They are because they're deemed to be adequately housed. So that means they could be in a 2-bed house wanting to move to a 2-bed house with no specific need. They found alternative accommodation in the meantime, application incomplete, made an error. So some other facts and figures, there is an allocations review panel. So when an application is banded, so the band is the level of priority. So it would be priority high, medium or low. So an application would be made live and they would be told their status level, I suppose, as to where they would be on the register. So if they're high, priority high, medium or low. The allocations review panel will discuss appeals for either rejected applications, so that's ones that we've said, no, you can't come on because you're adequately housed, or you don't meet the criteria, such as you don't meet the local connection criteria, or we do get appeals for banding, where we've said, we think you're in a medium band, and they've said, no, I'm not. I think I'm in a high, according to your allocations policy, so then we've asked them for more information to support that. Reasons for appeal in the main are because of band, because they want to be in a higher band. 5 were for adequately housed. There's no local connection. 8 were for eligibility. Eligibility can be things like an applicant has got rent arrears. It can be they're not a British citizen. It can be that they've caused antisocial behaviour that's deemed serious enough to not be on the housing register. That they want an additional bedroom. So it could be, the policy states, if you've got 2 children and they are both sons, they say you've got 2 sons, that you would be allocated a 2-bedroom house. It might be they've come back to us and said that one of the sons has got a specific medical condition and needs a bedroom of his own, and they shouldn't be sharing, but we weren't aware of that in the first instance. So that's when they'd come back and say, no, I need a 3-bedroom house, not a 2-bedroom. Number of complaints, as you can see, is we've had 6 for banding, 2 is not moving quick enough, and 1 was because of the result of a bid. They didn't like where they finished on the bid cycle. So current housing register statistics, since April 22 was when we took on the new housing register system and the new allocations policy came into play. So since then, we've had 116 cancelled as they didn't re-register. So from the 1st of June 23, we started a review policy. So every month, every person who registered in June gets a letter to say, do you still want to be on the register? Same again in July. If they're registered in July, do you want to still be on the register? So we're constantly doing the update if people still want to be on the register. 553 were cancelled for other reasons, and we've had 393 that were housed or have been on offer for a property. So waiting times. This is probably the part that's most important to me. So in a priority band, average waiting time is 182 days. The longest waiting time was 361. The reason they were 361 days was because we accepted a statutory duty to accommodate, but the applicant was detained in prison for several months, but a homeless duty had been accepted, and legally we can't relinquish that duty, so we have to accommodate and we have to keep it open. In a priority band, they're the ones that we will be saying you need to band every week. Yeah, you need to bid every week. High band is 285 days, longest being 1,844. Reason for the longest wait time was they were a 4-bed need, and we just don't get 4-bed or 5-bed properties being built, so it's quite a long time to wait. They also weren't bidding on every 4-bed that came available, so that increased their waiting time. Medium band 990 days, longest was 2033. Bidding regularly but banding isn't high enough was the reason, and a low band. Low band average waiting time 2521. No reason for the longest waiting time was that the no bids made. Waiting time when allocated a property is probably the figures that we should be going off when we're reporting figures. So average waiting time for somebody in priority when accommodated was 133.2 days. Shortest wait was 6 days. Longest waiting reason was that it was NBC tenant wanting a certain type of property and we had difficulty engaging, but we realised there was specific safeguarding issues and there were specific vulnerabilities with that person. So while we didn't have a homeless duty, they were still kept in a priority band because we kept wanting to engage, and because of the type of property that they needed, that made it more difficult. We're currently reviewing that application now. In a high band, average waiting time is 213 days, shortest wait was 19, and in a medium it's 491 with the shortest wait of 4. A wait time is largely reliant on the person bidding. If you are in a priority band, we have a system called auto bid, so the system does it for you. So it will put a bid on a property that it says you are eligible for. So if you are eligible for a 1-bed flat, it will put a bid on a 1-bed flat, and the system will be quite clever to say where, if there were 3 1-bed flats, it would put a bid on the ones where the person would finish higher. So we've got the bypass and refusal reasons. So when what happens with property allocation is we will advertise properties every week. They get advertised on a Wednesday at 2 minutes past midnight, and the cycle then closes again at Tuesday at 23:59. On a Wednesday, we then shortlist all the people that have put a bid on a property, and then they are banded in order. So in order, that means in level of banding, so it goes priority high, medium, low. If you've got 2 people in a priority band that have put a bid on a property, that is then who was in the priority band first. So then they would move to the top. If you've got 2 people in a priority band who were put in the same band on the same day, it's who had their application in first. What we then get is when we shortlist the properties and we get that list, we would then go out to the person, do a check on the people at that point to say, do they still meet the criteria of the housing register? Do they meet the criteria that abandon this property? So further checks are done then. And then we ring the person to say, do you want to look at this property? Are you interested? On this table, what we've done is looked at, we've tried to collate the reasons people refuse offers. It's more people refusing properties rather than us bypassing them. What would happen is when we bypass them, it could be that they've put a bid on a property, they said they want it, but it's a 1st floor flat, but they've stated they've got mobility issues, and they're saying to us, I know I can do it, and we're saying all your medical information says you're not going to be able to, but maybe this property would be better. Or it could be that we know they've put a bid on a village, they don't really know where that village is, and when we've explained it to them, they've said, I've got no transport, so that's really not a suitable offer for me. So we've got waiting times by priority and bedroom size. I've gone into it a bit further. In the priority bands, so this one I've only done it for priority and high because they're the 2 main bands. We've got longest wait time for a 1-bed need was 294 days. The complex case with multiple needs, they're currently in temporary accommodation and they have a needs a support package before they are moved into permanent, but we have got a multidisciplinary team around that person. For a 2-bed, they need specific adaptations for a property, and for 3 and 4 beds, they are domestic abuse cases where we have had to be very specific on locations. So we've given flexibility to the customer because they've said, I can't move to that area because their relative or their friend lives next door, or they drive past here because they go to work at the end of the street. A multitude of reasons. For high band, both applications, we've got two longest wait times, which we're currently reviewing. Obviously quite excessive days, but both applications are under review as neither have placed bids. The 1,484 days is they've only placed 5 bids since 2022, and that's not because there haven't been the properties. There have been the properties. It's just they've not placed the bids. But the applicant specifically wants a 1-bed bungalow in a certain location, which will obviously increase waiting time. So number of new homes that we have that have been built, and this goes down into the different areas. So if in Melton Mowbray Town, 22-23, there's 48, and 23-24, there's 39. I haven't been able to get the stats for 24-25 as yet. Villages 77 and 23 this year, and we've had 45 affordable rent in 22-23 and 38 in 23-24, which includes 6 MBC bought. And that's the end of the presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Chair, thank you. I just wanted to add on here, obviously this is going to be opened up for questions, but just to be clear, of what we don't want to do is answer any questions on specific cases, because what we don't want to do in a public forum is identify any risk of identifying any households within that as well.
I mean, yeah, I would re-emphasise that. I know it's difficult sometimes. So if members do have issues with ward members that would illustrate their question, then be careful how you present that information, so there's no possibility of identifying who that might be. Could I just ask for clarification? So we've had the presentation. In terms of questions, are you open to then dealing with the entirety of the report, not as well as the presentation? Yeah, okay. So committee members, Councillor Atherton.
Chair, I've got a question. When they're on the low priority, what are the waiting times, or on how do they move up to get to the next level and so on?
So the low priority was introduced for our sheltered schemes and our extra care schemes, because it was felt that the people in a low priority would be people who are maybe adequately housed, but are of a certain age where maybe they're thinking in the future that they want a particular type of property, but don't actually need to move. So that's what the low band is introduced for. What the banding priority does, it assesses people based on their medical needs, based on the size of their household, based on their risk in their property, if that property is a safe structure, if they are safe in that property, and if number of people within that property. So it is very subjective according to the applicant and the property that they want. So for instance, if somebody comes to us and says they're in a 2-bed house and they've got very steep stairs and they've got a mobility issue, we would say you've got a medical issue if you're willing to move to a ground floor property. If they want a 2-bed house, we would be looking at what we can do to make that current 2-bed house put adaptations in it, so they wouldn't be given the same level of priority if they were moving for a like-to-like property. And also, for instance, if somebody has accessible requirements and they're in a 1-bed bungalow and want to move to another 1-bed bungalow in another area, we'd be looking at different criteria. So it's not always the same for everyone, but to move up the bandings, it is about what that person needs at that time for them and their household.
So it goes by case. Yeah. By case. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Child.
The job title. Presuming he's leaving.
I think that's the typo. Apologies. It's a housing options officer.
Oh.
It's included in the report, but we must have omitted it off the
I
presentation.
thought maybe he'd given him notice. Okay.
It's not going anywhere.
Yeah, got 2 or 3 questions, Mike. What is proactively being done to meet with private landlords and the housing associations to increase the rent supply in the borough? I'll do them individually, shall I? Yeah, okay, Rachel.
So what we're trying to do in terms of housing providers, that is with another section within the council. So I am liaising with that council, but that is a question that they'd be able to answer more thoroughly. In terms of current private rented, what we are doing is liaising with private landlords and letting agents to try and stop people being evicted. So that is letting them know that we're here, that we can resolve issues such as rent arrears, if there's any tenancy issues within private rented. The private rented sector is very difficult at the moment because with the forthcoming changes in legislation next year for the Renters' Rights Bill, we're finding a lot of landlords are getting out the market. But what we do hope is that will settle off when we get into next year, and that we should see a bit of a decline in, because there won't be any Section 21 notices anymore, for instance. But the affordability is an issue, and whilst we are working, that is part of a bigger picture that is, I don't think I personally won't be able to resolve, but we're doing what we can to be proactive to the people that are coming to us.
Thank you. Is there identified areas for exception sites in the borough for social rented units to be built?
I
I don't know. I'm going to say, I don't know that's about housing allocation. But, Michelle, can you comment on that?
Yeah, it's probably sits outside of the scope of the report this evening, Bob. But there is work being done, obviously, to make sure that that through the work that we're doing from a HRA perspective, we're looking at options for conversions and development and acquisition, all of which will increase the supply of affordable housing. It forms part of a wider policy discussion. So I would suggest we take that outside of this particular discussion, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah. How will the council manage increase in demand and reducing access to social housing as the private rented sector is becoming increasingly unaffordable to those on low incomes?
So what we're trying to do at the moment, and we have been doing for the last 18 months, is be very proactive in telling people and telling residents that we're here to try and stop people leaving their properties in the first place. What I have noticed, I'm coming up to being 3 years at the council, and what I noticed was when I first started, there was an expectation that somebody could just hang keys in on a property and then the council would sort it out and then everything's going to be fine. That has changed, but what we are getting is increased presentations, but I feel we're getting increased presentations because they know we're available and they know that we're here. So what we are doing is being more proactive. We're looking at extra funding in terms of charitable donations. We're looking at how we work with our voluntary sector. We're working extensively with our with the support hub case management teams. We're working with many different agencies to try and resolve the issue. So it's not just a housing issue. Sometimes it is a lot of different issues with that person, but affecting the housing.
Rachel, final one, Mike, at the moment. Do you know the projected number of new supported living units for people with mental health planned in the borough over the next 5 years?
I'll be honest now.
You don't?
That's probably not for me to answer.
We don't have that information to hand, Councillor Chard, and if there was something in particular you would like us to follow up outside of this, very happy to do so. Obviously, that would be relevant in the context of supply of affordable housing and options for the future. What I would suggest, so we are going to be presenting to you in March regarding homelessness and the demands more generally and the move on options as agreed as part of your work plan review. Perhaps we cover the supported living offer as part of that.
That'd be useful, actually, if
yeah.
we could include it there,
No
because I think it is important with people with mental health, what the forward plan is, Mike. So that'll do for me for the time being. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I was reading actually something today that there's certainly some proposals about increasing the funding to local authorities to deal with homelessness. And that would encompass, I think, some of those areas as well. So I think it would be very timely to have that discussion when we have that meeting. Thank you. Any other questions that committee members want to raise? Councillor Thwaites.
Thanks, and thanks for the presentation. And first, I'll sort of say I want to congratulate you on your job, because it's got to be one of the most difficult jobs. You're dealing with people that are at a difficult point in their life, and you're always judged by the last worst case rather than the work that you've done in between. And I don't want to say but, because but however, it's always about communication, and it's about ease of access and all the rest of it. And you've sort of talked about a couple of parts of it, and it's about what steps have we made it for one, people to make it easier for them to apply, because again, if they're having a poor time in their life, trying to get on the internet even can be difficult, and how we can get around things like that, and then how we can actually communicate things. I think I've already mentioned that there are some jargon in there which I don't like. I hate the word bid, but that's just a personal thing. I think show interest is a much more pleasant term within it. It makes you feel like you're not actually, I'm trying to say my situation is worse than anybody else's, so I get the house, sort of thing. It's no, if I'm eligible for it, I want to be eligible for it. But what have we done to actually make it easier for people to apply, and then understand what the results of their situation has been?
That is something that we are looking to strengthen, but what we do offer is I feel now, probably 3 years on, we're stronger as a council in the message of housing options isn't just with housing options. It is, you've got tenancy services officers that maybe you've got tenants that aren't paying rent and could be facing eviction. They're saying, right, we can help you. Or you've got people that are maybe in bigger properties. They're saying, right, you can go on the register. We've got community safety coming to us. We've also got our support hub coming to us. So what we do is, if people don't have access to the internet, we offer the facilities at the DigiClinic at Phoenix House, but also our officers will do it manually for them. So they will sit on the phone, and I've heard them do it. They can be sat on the phone for half an hour up to an hour, going through every single question with somebody and asking them what to do. What we're also asking is, if somebody is not able to do that, we're asking if they got a family member that they want us to talk to, because I've done that myself. So I've been speaking to family members when it's been quite difficult for the person to engage, and then we've been getting the information that way. We do offer the facility of, say, paper applications if somebody is totally unable. But what we've tried to do is, I get not everybody looks at a website, and not everybody has the internet. So while we have tried to do that, we're also saying to people like the letting agents and the private landlords that are saying, I'm going to put my rent up, so they've got their shoe in to us to say, this person is going to be in difficulty, they need to speak to you. And as part of our, now we've got the housing register as an option to resolve homelessness. It's no longer the option to resolve homelessness, which is, I think, what it was several years ago. So having it as an option means other people in different agencies, in different companies, are now saying, go speak to housing options. Mad Mac, for instance, probably they weren't making as many referrals. Storehouse do. They will send people down to us, and I think this year we've had more people coming through the door and speaking to our offices than we have had on any other year since I've been here, which I'm seeing as progress. The more people we get, and then the more people we're aware of.
Just to add to that, I've made a list and I was trying to tick off which ones Rachel has covered, but obviously we have within the actual directorate our integrated people offer, which is the sort of working together, and I guess it's a benefit of a smaller borough council that you have people that can work together in that way rather than in silos. So the community safety team, the community support hub, they all talk to each other, and because they've got that council background, there's no wrong door for somebody to go through. So if somebody came into the community support hub and there was a housing issue, they wouldn't just send them to Parkside, they would actually support them through that. And similarly, very similar relationship with the storehouse. And we've got our customer services, so that was based on member feedback, where we provided the drop-in days as well. So it is like a no wrong door approach. So it's always subject to improvement. We'll look at our website, we'll review as part of the housing allocations policy whether we've got updated user guides, how to apply, but also considering there'll be things if somebody wants to go on the housing register or register as homeless and they've got some complexities in their lives, there'll be information about what they need to provide as ID, and we don't want to put people off applying because of that. So they'll, hopefully there'll be caveats in there to say we can be a little bit flexible about when you provide it. It's important to make that contact first. So I hope that answers.
Just to ask a supplementary on this one, because obviously I've not been through this process myself, but the comments that I get in emails and I know other councillors have had where somebody is making a bid for a property and they feel that they're at the top of the list, and then suddenly when it gets allocated that they're not. So I don't know whether actually showing who's at the top of the list is a good idea, but how does that happen? Well, how do they actually get that perception, and how can we probably better feed the message back to them on if they've been successful? Obviously, they're very happy. If they've not been successful, they're very unhappy. And how can we actually sort of make that message better? If that's a
Sorry, I've pressed something on here, so you were coming through here as well. With the reason that they have that bidding position, so they would go onto the website and they would be able to see where they are. The idea is that informs them which is the best property to bid for. That is all very well in a world where we have 10, 15 properties every week and people could choose which one they go to. We're having probably 2 or 3 a week. So that's why they have that. But it's also to show that transparency. So it shows that people aren't just being cherry picked, that we are sticking to an allocations policy and that they can see where they are and that's where the person will be. What people get confused with, I think, is that we have this auto bid facility. So the auto bid facility puts bids on applicants at 5 minutes to midnight. So people will be looking all day and going, I'm number 1, that's brilliant. They'll wake up Wednesday morning and see that they're maybe 4th or 5th, but it's because the auto bids have gone on. But what we do like to remind customers is that sometimes the auto bid facility isn't as sophisticated as we would like. So if somebody is a 1-bed flat, a need for a 1-bed flat, it might be they need a 1-bed ground floor flat. So the bid would have gone on a 2nd or 3rd floor flat. So when we come to shortlisting, we'll bypass those top 3 people probably because we know they need a ground floor flat. So it would go to like bid number 4 or bid number 5. So that's probably that's a lot of the confusion that we get. What we have got and what the allocations policy does, when we've done the refresh will go to cabinet week after next on the 11th. But what we've done with the changes is we've tried to make it simpler for customers to read so it follows the process. What I've struggled with in the time that I've been here is that it didn't read very well to a customer in layman's terms, but it also it just wasn't as clear as it could have been, I think. And what we've tried to do is split it into the different stages so it's clear about the type of checks that we made and what happens after that bid cycle has closed.
Could I just actually on that, I mean, listening to that, I mean, it seems to be the simpler way to avoid people having that sort of elation and deflation going on would be if initially when people put bids in, they're simply told your bid's been accepted and the actual order of bids doesn't appear until after the bidding is closed. Or if that's too complicated, that there's something explicitly saying the order shown may change once the bidding period is closed, just so people have that understanding. Because I've had that feedback as well, that people, they're all excited, and then it's a bit like being on eBay where there's an automatic bidder and you think I've got that thing, and then boom, 3 seconds to go. Anyway, sorry, Alan. I've noted that you wanted to comment. Is it on this particular issue? Yeah.
It is. If somebody hasn't got access to internet, how can they bid on properties? Is it automatic bidding and things like that?
They can request to be on a auto bid. So generally people in a priority band are on auto bid, but if they're in a lower band, they can request to be on that, or they can just ring up. So that can be done through customer services, it can be done through us, it can be done through support hub, or what we can do is do it through family members as well.
Did you have any further questions, Alan? In that case, I'll give you a break and invite Councillor Lumley, who'd indicated.
I've got about 8 or 9 questions. So do you want to let Alan, Councillor Thwaites, do you want to tie? Do you want to have a?
We'll take 2.
Take 2 in a tie.
And
Yes,
then we'll have a
yeah.
break because I'll give you a rest.
Yeah, firstly, just to say thank you to Rachel, Aisha and Michelle for their hard work. So I know when you both entered your roles, there was like this area needed improvement, and it has improved a lot. And I've seen that, and I know you've had to be quite tough with lots of areas. So well done on that, because I know it's been tough, especially my emails don't help either. But just I've got about 8 or 9 questions, but just number 1, you know, we've got at any one time sort of like X number of sort of like void properties, and I know we've done a lot of work to try and get that number down. What people say to me is there any way, if that property, Simon, I've seen it's empty, you know, is there any way the council, they could be seen to be moving into that property, we could move into it, because I don't think it requires a lot of work according to the tenants. They may know more than me sometimes, or they just feel that property, it looks all right. People looking from the window sometimes, and they say, Simon, it's not that bad, can we move into it? Then I contact Housing Options, and obviously they say that. The question is there any way that we can try and get a property out of the voids that could be used for like emergency accommodation that actually doesn't require quite a lot of work to it, so it is sort of like livable?
All Melton Borough Council properties will go through a process of whether they are deemed fit to live in, and they have to get to a certain standard that we would deem safe. So some people will look at a property and see, oh, that looks okay, but we've not done gas safety checks, we've not done electrical checks on it yet. So it might be that they think that's okay, but we haven't done those checks. The council is working very hard to make sure that those void repair times are minimised as much as they can. But what I would say to everybody is we can't just say, oh, well, you live on this street and your next door properties come available. You can't just have that, because I've also got a number of people that also want that property. The other thing as well, which I think is important to know, is that we do give the same level of priority to people who are in a private sector as council or as housing association tenants. So just because you're a Melton Borough Council tenant doesn't mean, and you're in a 2-bed flat and want a 2-bed flat, doesn't mean you're going to get a 2-bed flat, because we've probably got people who are in a similar situation or a worse situation in a different type of property. So that's that's what it's about, the policy, and the policy is made so that the people in the most priority and the most need get the property at that time.
Yeah.
Thank
you for that. And, oh, sorry,
Sorry, Councillor, I just wanted to point out, obviously, we are held to a higher standard as local authorities, and the risks far outweigh somebody moving in without the right checks being done. So, yeah, we have to balance that, but it's not worth the risk.
Yeah, no, two. Yeah, no, it's just an answer, because it's just I didn't know the answer to that actually. Sometimes I forget that there's extra checks. It was just trying to help the situation. Just my second question. One thing I do get often over the years, correspondence, is that I often get one parent and also one child in a property, and they're in a 1-bedroom. Sorry, they're in another property, you know, with family or friends wanting a council property or housing association property. They're a parent and a child, and they're told by Melton Borough Council that they can only have an actual 1-bedroom property. And they'll say to me, Simon, you know, because I'm that age and my son or daughter is that age, we have to have like 2 not separate rooms, but we're only being told we're having 1. Is there any way that can be reviewed?
Well, that applies to people who haven't got 100% access to children. So that was a difficult decision that was taken by members 2 years ago when the allocations policy was refreshed, that people who had access to children could only have a one bed, that child wouldn't be classed as part of their household. And the reason for that is because we don't have enough properties. So what the challenge, and I know you get challenges on it as well, is it's somebody who has got, so a child has got a house, but it's with another parent. I totally understand the need for two parents to support, but there is a house and there are people and children who don't have any house. So that's why we've given that priority. And we've said that you won't get an extra bedroom allocated if you've not got your child 100% of the time. But what we also do take account of is when you are looking at, say, one bed flats, for instance, it is about space standards. So we are trying to encourage people that if they have their child at a weekend, that maybe they can do things like sofa beds. Could the bedroom be partitioned? Could it be separated off for privacy? There's things like that that could be done to make a situation more bearable. But while we don't have this massive influx of properties, I do feel it's a very difficult decision, but that isn't suggested in the new changes for the policy for that to be changed.
Yes, it's a question to do with one of the examples, unlikely to qualify. And it's section D, and it says people with mental health issues who say they want an extra room for a friend or relative who provides support. And this is, as I say, this is an example unlikely to qualify to go on the register. Now, if these people are under a doctor, but vulnerable to suicidal tendencies, would they be allowed to have an extra room? Because these suicidal thoughts can come in the day or in the night. And if they are very vulnerable to that, then I think there should be something to say that they can have 2 rooms.
What we would look at for that is whether there is things that they have a permanent carer and that carer is there overnight. So if somebody is claiming carers allowance and that person is going into that property, and it doesn't really have to be, we would say for probably 5 out, I think what it says is 5 out of 7 nights. That's some of the guidance that we've got, that they having to go in because that person is at risk at certain times, because it can be the night times are the darkest part for somebody. But we would need confirmation that that person needs a nighttime carer. And again, it's similar to the children that aren't there 100%. It is if we could be more flexible if there were more properties. So it is just trying to make sure the people in the most need at that time get the particular property. And it is being flexible with the room space and the space standards within that property of how carers or friends can stay overnight and be accommodated.
Yeah, what happens if they haven't got a carer though? They are under a doctor, because that way you've got the proof. But for some reason or other, they haven't got a carer. That is a big concern, because a lot of people don't really, in these circumstances.
So what we'd also be looking at is that it's not just a housing issue. We'd also be looking at where is their support coming from? What support can we refer into to try and get that person? So you'd be looking at the crisis cafes, you'd be looking at the mental health support, local area coordinators and our support hub to try and help them deal with it, because sometimes moving to a property is not going to change how the situation of why their mental health might have changed, but their anxiety and the levels of depression could be the same in another property. So we try to put mechanisms in place and put support agencies in place that can help the person respond to situations in a more positive light.
Okay. Councillor Cliff, let's have a new voice.
Okay, I've got 2 questions as well, just carrying on the tradition. The first one's really straightforward, and it was just a query really. Your policy for awarding your band levels, your low, medium, high priority, is there statutory framework that you work towards, or is the statutory bit that you've got to have an internal policy and you adhere to your internal policy, if that makes sense. But is there statutory stuff around that as well?
So the statutory guidance is that we have to give reasonable preference to certain categories. And in those certain categories, that is people who are accepted homeless by the council. So we owe a statutory duty, homeless statutory duty, that there are environmental health standards. So it might be environmental health have gone to a property and said, we need to serve an emergency prohibition notice on this. It is for people, so we've got to give preference to people who have been members of the armed forces. And our policy does that. We have an extended waiting time, and we've got to give people who have been care leavers. There are quite a few other categories, and I can't remember them off the top of my head, but there is statutory guidance. But also the thing to remember is as well is that with an allocations policy, while the statutory guidance, it is very much reflective of the needs of the area. So if you were living in a London borough, your local connection, ours is 12 months if you're working and living here 2 years. If you're in a London borough, it can be 5 years. So it's dependent on what the need is for that area. And we feel that the policy and the changes to the policy reflect the current need of what Melton residents.
That's really helpful. It's just good to be able to go back to people if there's a query, that you've got this kind of, everything's underpinned by the statutory. Yeah. You're not just making it up as you go along, or just getting together every year going, oh, we fancy prioritising that group this year, and or whatever. There is a statutory framework that underpins all the decisions, and that's really helpful to feed back to people when there's questions. Can I ask my second question, or do you want to?
Just one additional point, just while Rachel's talking, just something that I think is also worth bearing in mind, that across everything that we do, we have to have due regard to the public sector equality duty, and that forms part of the considerations for that prioritisation as well. And I recall in a previous authority that became a really key consideration around actually accessing support, and a particular priority that was given to that. So that's definitely something that features as part of our considerations. So that's part of that statutory framework as well.
One. Okay, so okay, I'm going to see if I can explain this properly without identifying anybody. I do know that there will be people locally who perhaps were given family council houses years ago, and their children have grown up now, and now it's just a couple left in a 3-bedroom family home. And there will be people that might think, oh no, actually we're happy to downsize. But obviously when they go back into the system, they're shocked to find out actually they're only eligible for 1-bedroom place. And in their mind, they're thinking, actually, we're going to do the council a favour. We're going to give back this lovely family home because then it can benefit other people. But actually, we do that for a 2-bed. I don't think we want to do that for a 1-bed, because that's quite a massive drop in their standard of living. Now, I understand, ideologically speaking, why that's the case, because every new allocation is done on a needs base, and so everyone goes back in and is assessed as their needs then. But I suppose my question comes from a pragmatism. When I was looking at the figures in terms of priority people waiting for 1-beds and how long they're waiting, pragmatically speaking, that couple are going to take more away in terms of the housing stock from the people waiting for a 1-bed than if there was a little bit of flexibility and said, okay, well, in recognition of the fact that actually you're going to free up a family home for us, we will allow you to take a 2-bed, because actually in terms of the needs of the borough, we've got a higher demand on 1-beds anyway and a longer waiting period. So I'm just wondering what your answer to that would be from a pragmatic point of view. Because I understand ideologically why there are very, very good reasons why you don't allow people to downsize from a 3 to a 2 if on today's criteria they would only get a 1. But I'm just thinking about pragmatically, if it helps other local people, is there any flexibility in that?
That is a good question. That is, but if you're under 63.5, you would be subject to the bedroom tax, to the extra rates. But if you were working, then that wouldn't necessarily become an issue. But I do think that is something that we do need to consider, and has been overlooked, because I know it's a big frustration of mine, thinking we'll get this 3-bed house back and there's a 2-bed bungalow that this older couple would be suitable for, because particularly if you are of an older age, you can afford that property. And there is flexibility in the allocations policy in the new one and the current one for things like management moves. So I think that's probably something that we need to take back, so that we are looking at how many people have we got on the register that are current tenants that want to downsize, and what properties would they be eligible for. Because I also know that we struggle with 2-bed flats in sheltered properties, in sheltered schemes that are second and third floor where there's no lift, because you've got to be of a certain age or you've got to be claiming a disability benefit, but you've got to walk up 3 flights of steps. So the two don't often mix. So that is something that we can take back.
I'm going to ask Councillor Sharp if he's any questions. You never have done the full set, then I've got a couple as well.
Do you want a mic?
No, I've just, what's the situation with, okay then, with our fine one, with pets, where you've got an allocation with someone who will not leave their pet if they need accommodation?
So government guidance is that housing options, homelessness, can't separate pets from their owners, and that is some of the issue that we've got with our temporary accommodation at the moment, because we're waiting for properties that have got access to a garden so that their pet can go out in it. yeah, they're not going to get an extra. I have had that request before, though, believe me. But no, they're not. They wouldn't get that. But it just makes it more difficult. So back in the day, I've been doing this quite a long time, but back in the day, we'd have paid for kennels for dogs to go in, so that we could accommodate the person. But guidance now is that we can't do it. What some of our schemes do offer where there's been an issue, say there's been a lot of dog fouling in an area, we would be saying you can't have a pet in this area. So that means somebody's just got to wait, they've got to wait longer to go in a specific area. But what we have difficulty with is somebody can move into a property, get a pet, and there's not a lot that we can do about it.
In certain places, is there an allocation certain areas that amount of houses that you have? Because I know a lot of
I don't
normal
know.
tenants would say, sorry, we do not take dogs, cats, iguanas, whatever.
I probably only know of 2 off the top of my head, but there are more. So I don't know the exact figure on that. But what I do know is that decision is taken because there's previously been issues within that area, and it's not just a blanket ban on every single type of property.
Thank you. I've got a number of indications, but I'm going to ask a couple of questions first, and then we've all had a bite, and then we'll start the second round. Just going back to the report and the alterations, or some of the additions in the policy refresh. One of the things that's identified is that properties now classed under bedroom and household size rather than just bedroom size. This would mean that properties with a separate reception room downstairs and bigger bedrooms will be prioritised for bigger families of 3 plus children. The question is, do we have that level of detail information on the properties we currently have? I know we've been doing a lot of work at making sure we know our properties, but does that extend to knowing how big the reception rooms and the bedrooms are? That's the first question.
Well, luckily, we only have to do it property by property. So because we're only getting probably 2 or 3 a week, we can update the system as the properties come available. So the idea for that is, I think I put an example in the report, was if you've got a single parent with a boy who is 14 and a girl who is 9, they're eligible for a 3-bed property. They could move into a 3-bed property that has got 3 double bedrooms and a dining room downstairs. While we've got somebody who has got 4 children, single parent and 4 children, who is then offered a 3-bed property, but it's a double bedroom and 2 single bedrooms. So there isn't enough room for the beds to be in the property, whereas they'd be much better off in the ones with the 3 double bedrooms than not. So we're just trying to be a bit more flexible on the space within a house, on how that can be used and what is safe for that particular family, and not just saying, no, you don't meet the criteria for that, or yes, you can have that one. It's just trying to be more flexible.
That's really how I've been understanding that it's done as the properties arise. But do we have we established what the guidelines would be in terms of the size of rooms?
Yep, they're set out in, I can't remember the exact terminology, but it's in space standards which are governed by environmental health. So that says how many persons should be able to sleep in a particular property and in a room size. And for that, when you're counting room sizes, you are counting living areas. You're not counting kitchens and bathrooms, but you are counting things like dining rooms or big living rooms.
And the second question, that goes back to the presentation, and of course I make scrappy notes, so I hope I'm reflecting that back correctly. But in terms of deciding on allocations, you referred to a panel. How's that panel made up?
So the panel's only there for people who are appealing their banding or appealing their eligibility. So the panel consists of me. It consists of the officer so our support officer who originally made that decision. It has got somebody from our rents team in there, somebody from our Safer Communities team, and the tenancy services manager. So we've tried to cover all the different pockets. But what I feel is it's important that myself and the support officer are there, so he can say why he made that decision. But I'm looking at it from a statutory perspective to say, right, this person, what are the complex needs with this person? But we're also looking at it to say, well, they had rent arrears from, we've got somebody saying, well, they've got rent arrears from 5 years ago, but they owe this much money, and we can put all those circumstances into play.
I mean, I was just trying to identify how balanced that, and I'm quite satisfied that that's the right way to do that. Okay, I'll go to Councillor Thwaites, then Councillor Gordon, then Councillor Lumley.
Thank you. I'm trying to get into this one before Simon does, but and you may sort of say we can't answer all of this question because we're talking about allocations tonight, but it's about problem tenants, either before or after they've been allocated a property. And there's always the perception that some people, they know they're going to be a problem before they get there, but they're still given a property. And then it's what happens if they are a problem in that a problem tenant, and it's disruptive to all the other people. About what are the processes that we have to go through?
So there are guidelines on the type of checks that we can do. What we can't do is do criminal conviction checks or police checks on every single person. That's deemed as disproportionate, and there has been case law where councils have been held accountable for that. What we can do is we do basic checks with our Safer Communities team to say, have you been involved with this person? If we have a reason to believe that there is something that we need to know, we will contact the police in that instant. But for a lot of people, we would get information from either their probation officer to see what is relevant. So one of the examples I used the other day was somebody could have been convicted of an assault. We can't ban somebody from the housing register if they've had a fight in the town centre on a Friday or Saturday night. They've done a bad thing, but we can't ban them because it's not housing related. If they've been found guilty of assault against their partner or against a neighbour that was living next to them, that's tenancy related. So we need the specifics of what it is that person's doing. What we also try to do is when we know people are coming through us with particular issues, we will judge allocations based on that particular property. Are they going to be okay in that area? So we might have a person that we know is a perpetrator of domestic abuse. It's got no convictions, but we've had several victims come through who have been previous partners. We know they're a perpetrator of domestic abuse. What we wouldn't do in that allocation, we'd be saying, who else is in that area? If they are a single person and they're moving into a block of flats that is predominantly single females in that block, we'd be saying we don't think that's a good match for that person. So we'd be looking at other areas. What I think the thing that we do, and I think the new policy would get stronger and better at, is getting us the information before we make somebody live, getting all of the information so we can make a considered assessment about if that person is eligible in the first place, and if they are eligible, where is the best place for that person. That's one of the reasons why we've introduced local lettings policies this year, was so that where there has been particular issues in certain areas, we've got a lettings policy for that block, which you've got the allocations policy, but your local lettings policy kind of supersedes that. So that's where you're saying, well, no, this area, you only allowed people who were of a certain age. They can't have any convictions for this because maybe there's been a lot, they've had too many issues in that area. But we've also got to be proportionate to the rest of our stock. We can't have local lettings policies across the board that say we're not going to house anybody that's got any convictions because we've got a crime wave of antisocial behaviour. That would be extremely disproportionate, and people have got to have a home and people have got to live somewhere. What it is our job as a council and with our external colleagues is to try and manage that risk, be aware of it, and then put the safeguards in place to try and manage that risk.
Yeah, thank you. So just in terms of the other end of that question then. So yeah, so there are things that we do in terms of eligibility to join the housing register, the checks that are undertaken then as part of the decisions to move people into accommodation. But a process that was introduced in the last 12 months. And this was really based on some learning. I know Councillor Lumley, we've discussed this at length as well, was pre-tenancy assessments. So somebody may well be eligible for a particular property, but the housing team will then carry out a further assessment to check suitability. And sometimes that does result in that allocation not going ahead, or it can result in additional support being put in place. So that's something we spoke to the housing regulator about that's now in place. I think just going back to Rachel's point around the fact that sometimes we have statutory duties, so we do need to find people to find suitable and appropriate homes. And human beings are complex, and sometimes things do happen. And in the same way that we have to be proportionate about assessing and allocating homes, we have to be proportionate about how we then address any behaviours that arise as well. No two cases are the same, and it's really easy to have lots of opinions and perspectives about what should and shouldn't happen. But one of the reflections that the housing team have had is a need to really help people better understand the steps and process that go into managing antisocial behaviour, or what does constitute behaviour, what kind of evidence is needed, what kind of timelines go into that. So that forms part of that as well. It does fall outside of the allocations policy, but obviously that linkage across is really important.
I'm going to keep you paused there for a moment, Alan, because I think Councillor Child wanted to say something on this specifically, and then I've got the comment flowing from the answer that
Can I just ask a question, just as a follow on from that? Are people allowed a second chance? For example, if someone's been sectioned, detained, released with treatment from a mental health issue, are they given a second chance and then maybe supported to access supported living?
So this is obviously, we talked about earlier about our public sector equalities duty. Equally, we have things like the rehabilitation of offenders, for example, where it's recognised that's part of somebody's rehabilitation in terms of considering them for a home, because you cannot keep penalising if they've served a term or a sentence. And yeah, if they've been sectioned, we have that wouldn't stop them being considered for a home.
No, I think that was a helpful added point. Can I just ask something? And it just flows from your comments about domestic abuse victims. I was going to ask a question later, but it seems sensible to ask it now. So in terms of people presenting because being needing assistance because of domestic abuse, do we require any level of evidence around that, so we actually accept on face value people's need in that respect?
We're not allowed to ask for evidence. It is the Domestic Abuse Act says that we shouldn't be stopping people from preventing people from accessing housing by saying we need evidence. So encouraging, making what we used to do, not the council, but what housing teams used to do, was to say that right, we need a police report. That's not. But what we do is we do a risk assessment. Anybody who comes in, we will do a risk assessment to see what that current level of need is. So that's one of the reasons why on the website we don't say you need X, Y, and Z to apply, because if somebody is a victim of domestic abuse, they might not be able to get 6 months worth of bank statements because their partner's got them. They might not be able to get a tenancy agreement because it's in the partner's name. So that's why we have to have that flexibility, so that we don't try and deter people from coming into us, from the people who need it the most.
And just domestic abuse isn't the factors on domestic abuse isn't just physical factors. Obviously, there's coercive control and others where, again, we'd be putting them in a really difficult situation if we needed evidence.
Yeah, thankfully, I was going to ask it later, but I think it's very important because we know an awful lot of domestic abuse goes unreported in terms of people seeking help from the police. So I'm reassured on that. I'm going to go back to Councillor Thwaites while I go and get a drink to try and sort my cough out.
Well, you've covered my supplementary question on what I was going to ask, but so I'll change tack slightly and talk about where you mentioned that people's needs change and that sort of thing, and where we need to adapt the property or adapt to property before they move in or one that they're living in. I mean, what sort of proportion is that, just to give us a sense of size?
I can't give you exact numbers. I've actually got them on an email because I've just done a freedom of information request on that. But what we are looking at and changing is the people who are in a priority band or the people in a high band. If they need a specific type of property, we're looking at how can we how do we make sure that they don't just become another application on the register? So I think that's maybe what happened a few years ago. They just sat there. But what we're looking at is this person needs a property, and they're then considered for every property that is a 2-bedroom need. And we're going into every 2-bedroom property and saying, this is not suitable because they've got 20 steps down to the front door and you can't get a ramp down there, that sort of thing. What we that is one of our biggest pressures, because we know people need urgent housing, but what we also need is the properties to do that. So if they're a council property, obviously we have our aids and adaptations, but for people who are in private rented or owner occupiers, what we're now doing more of is referring into Lightbulb, which is a county project, which can then put them forward for disabled facilities grants or for just minor adaptations. We're trying to use that a bit more to try and keep people in their home where they can be.
Yeah, that's fine. That's good for me.
Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, I'm just going to revisit a past thing we've been talking about with dogs. Right, the issue of dogs doesn't necessarily have to, a person doesn't have to have a property with a garden, because I know of a lot of people in the flats that have got dogs and you hardly hear anything from them. If, it's really good. So it can work. And I just wanted to bring that up because even though it's ideal to have a garden, you don't have to. So I think we ought to look at that side of it as well, because at the end of the day, it does combat loneliness for some people. Thank you.
That is definitely something we can take forward. And yeah.
Councillor Lumley.
Thanks, Chair. My next two questions. Just a really quick comment before I start. The answers you've given, Rachel and Aishan, Michelle, and that. You've given some really good answers. I didn't know, for example, the 5 minutes to midnight, or the auto bids come on. Hence the after midnight, the allocations change from what person was number one and now not number one. Could you put a lot of these answers on the internet, on the NBC website? So, because I get so many phone calls and emails about these exact questions, and sometimes I just think, well, I'm assuming someone's just actually bid and just gone above you. That'd be good if you could get the time to do that on the website. Then I can refer them, so I can answer them probably from the internet, or I can refer them to the internet. That's just a comment. My two questions are coming up, Chair. Just my first question. The next one. On TV, the last few weeks been Christmas, obviously adverts coming on. You've had the like Salvation Army and the crisis housing charity advertise. If we've got a period where any council needs urgent accommodation, overspill, are we actually contacting them to see if they've got their own stock for properties? Because I know they have some of their own centres now. That's number one. Number two, my second question is, I'll pick one. Hang on a minute. Yeah. On the panel that decides the allocations on a Wednesday, I think it is, because the just recent ASB as a theme coming to light, is there an officer that could be on that allocation? Oh, there is already. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. That's my next thing. Thank you.
So in response to your first question, none of the other councils, we have we work quite closely with the other councils and the other housing teams to try and mitigate any pressures. There isn't an influx, that there isn't extra housing. What we have experienced this year is the loss of funding to the Falcon Centre in Loughborough has meant that we can't do referrals there anymore. So that has massively affected us for the people who are the most complex. We just don't have that accommodation anymore. That has been taken up by Charnwood. Charnwood Borough Council pay for that. We got an alert last week to say they've opened up some Christmas beds that are for anybody. So we will be using them and we'll be making referrals. But again, all the other districts within Leicestershire will also be doing the exact same thing.
Simon, I just wanted to refer to your comment that you made first of all, which was the bidding message on the website. That's definitely something we will take away. But I think also, just given some of the questions that have come up today, we feel like a lot of them are scenario based. So if members will find it useful for us to do some kind of a frequently asked questions for you to be able to address some of the more common scenarios that we come across, because that might help you in that's something we could take away as well.
Thanks, H. If you conclude the ones where, when people ask me the number of rooms they're going to have in a property, and it includes like the dining room and kitchen, not the kitchen or bathroom, but the dining room and the other bedrooms and another living room are part of that. That'd be good, because people say, well, I need a 3-bedroom, but if we include in those rooms as part of it, that would be good. Yeah.
Just to be clear, in the main, it is mainly about bedrooms. We're only looking at other spaces for people who aren't full-time members of that household.
We'll be able to, no, we won't be able to turn it close on. I think some of the questions I've got have been asked by other councillors actually, so it's actually not as bad as what I thought. As you probably know, Rachel and other officers, so I've had some the last few years where people can't get up the stairs, etc., access their properties on the first or second floor flat. They've been asked to go get occupational health, to fill out forms, to do an assessment. That often takes months and months and etc. Is there any way, if say a councillor or a member of the public, that residents or their family friends highlight that to the councillors, is there any way that they say, look, they clearly can't get up the stairs? Is there any way, without going through the occupational health, and an officer was to see them as proof, could the whole time frame of that be moved a bit more forward?
We don't just ask for occupational health assessments. The reason we would ask for that is if they require specific adaptations. So what we ask for as well is for their PIP award. So if they get a high level of PIP, we would take that into account, the mezzanine ground floor. But it's also what their NHS summary. So your NHS summary can be either on an app on your phone or it can be a free record. That would give a rundown of the type of medication that somebody's on and the type of difficulties they've gone into the GP. So we don't just ask for an occupational health assessment. That, like I said, that is largely if somebody needs a adaptation. But I know in some cases which you're referring to, it's because they've not been to the doctor and they're not claiming any disability benefits. So we had no proof whatsoever of their circumstances. So that was why we needed that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Rachel. Regarding people that do actually to turn up as, I'd say as homeless, say, are we trying to refer them to like the hub, the hub, to try and get them possibly a job as well as part of the whole process?
The immediate need for us is to resolve the housing, but as part of that, we're looking at their full support needs because we do know that housing isn't just the main issue. So they would be referred into our case management team. And with that, that would be looking at, do they need any drug alcohol support, or do they need further education? Do they need employment? So that would be part of the process with that.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, all right.
Thank
What we do, every case is case by case. And if somebody is coming out of a rehab facility, there are guidelines within the homelessness legislation in terms of priority need. If somebody is coming out of a detox facility, then the link is a lot different. We maybe wouldn't be classing them as in a priority need because they're not at that point where they're detoxing. Detoxing is very different to rehab. So if they're coming out of a rehab facility, that would be part, and they have got nowhere to live, that is part of our statutory guidance about, are they a priority need? Where is the best place for them to live? So while we would be mindful that we're maybe not putting them next door to somebody who we know is an active user or an active dealer, it is that we also have to be mindful that drugs are everywhere, but where is the best person for that person at that time? Because I have people when I've been working here and I've been working other places, it's I can't live in this town because everybody knows me. But what my experience says is that if we haven't got that person hasn't got the skills in place to be able to say no or to be able to deal with the addiction, even if they move to another place, those things can easily be sought out. So yeah, we will be mindful, but it is about the stage of where that person is at in their treatment.
Yeah, if there's somebody that's in rent arrears, and obviously it's going to take a long time for them to probably pay it off. What happens if in the meantime, or even at the time, they have a health problem, to get about mobility wise, and it's getting worse over time and they have to climb steps? Now, I know sometimes when obviously, if they're in rent arrears, you're not always going to move them to another place. But because of that, with the mobility issues, even though he's probably paying off the debt he owes, but obviously there's a lot more to be paid, how would you react to that? Because I hope you would give him another place that's suitable for him.
What we're looking at with that is, again, it's case by case, but it's looking at is what is the most prevalent need of that person. So if they have rent arrears and we feel that they would be better suited to another property, say if they're in a council property and they're wanting to move to another council property, that can still be recovered, and that's the arrangement with that person. We wouldn't be excluding people who have a genuine need to move for something like health or domestic abuse. So I know there's been, I know this isn't particularly health, but we've had people before who have got a notice from a landlord through no fault of their own, landlords wanting to sell the property. But 5 years ago, they owed a lot of money to the council. That's not been recovered and they've still got that debt. But we have to take it from, in terms of homelessness, not housing register in homelessness, how have they lost their last settled address? So their last settled address was where they got their notice. So while they wouldn't be on the register in terms of a medium high band, they would go into a priority band when we've got to that main duty of homelessness. And it is about looking at that particular situation and what is that person to do. But what we're also doing is saying to that person, you do know you owe money, right? Let's get a payment plan in place, because it could take you 13 weeks to get a property anyway. So let's start those repayments now if they're affordable and what's affordable.
Yeah, but if the person is already living in a council a house or flat, what happens then? Because he can't get up the steps, and so he's still paying off his debt, which is, he could owe quite a lot, as I said. But what happens then if he's still in the place that does belong to the council? you know, would he get priority to move, which I hope he would do, but would he get that priority?
It would. The rent arrears aren't necessarily going to come into account, but it would depend on the health needs of that person. So again, it's subjective into what that person needs. So I obviously can't comment on individual cases, but it is about what does that person, where is that person living, and what is the type of property that he wants. So if they want a particular, if they want the area, we'll assess them based on the banding. So they would only be a priority for a move if they got that priority in high banding. So if it was felt that their medical circumstances only met, say, a medium level, they're not going to get that priority level of access to housing. But it is about, in terms of the rent arrears, that's a conversation that happens with the rent officers and the tenancy officers and say, if you do move, this isn't going to stop you from moving because you've got a health issue, but you need to repay it then.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a question that just popped into my mind from part of the discussion just then. If somebody's in private rented accommodation, I know, you know, Section 21's going, but there'll still be provisions if a landlord decides I'm selling the property that they could issue a notice. And someone's in private accommodation comfortably paying the rent and gets notice that the landlord requires them to vacate, do they automatically have access to our housing register, regardless of their means?
So if they've got an income that is below, I can't remember the thresholds off the top of my head, but they've got to be below a certain level of equity, savings in their bank account. I think it, yeah, 16,000, thank you. If they're above that, then we would say no, you're ineligible because you've got financial means to resolve your own housing circumstances. We get a lot of people who are working but don't have say £5,000 to pay a bond, rent in advance, and all the other charges that are associated with moving. So that's why they would come to us. But what happens is, what we need to do more of is to encourage people to come to us earlier, because they would go onto the register at the start of the notice. Say they came to us on the day the notice was served, they'd go on the register, and as it starts at the, as it is at the minute, they'd be in a prevention duty and be in a medium band. When that would be for 56 days. For the after that 56 days, they'd then move into a relief duty. That would move them into a high band. And after that 56 days, then we'd look at, do we owe a statutory duty to house them? So are they homeless? Are they eligible? Are they in a priority need? Do they have a local connection to the area? Yes, yes, yes. Right, you're in a priority need. What we're trying to do with the changes is to make, when somebody comes at the start of that notice, that they automatically go into a high band and don't have to go in the medium band. Because what we're finding is that the people who are in a prevention band are just sat there and it's not proactive in them getting rehoused. Or we do everything we can to look at other options with them. So other private rented, because we know some might want areas that are a bit more desirable, or they want a particular type of property that can be accessed better in the private rented sector. So we'll do that work with them. But if they're adamant that the council register is the only thing they can do, because they might have got credit history, they might just not be able to afford it. And if you've got a notice, why would you not? Because that's when you're going to get your priority. So we're trying to do that so that people, whether you're after your notice period or before or at the start of your notice period, you've got the same level of priority, because ultimately you are just going to move through, you're going to move through the stages. So let's bring that earlier.
You sure, Councillor? Certain. Any other questions that anyone wishes to raise? Councillor Thwaites.
It's just more of a comment than probably a question, because all the people we've talked about are people that are in desperate need for housing, but that's not the majority of our tenants. They're people that are moving into council properties. So, you know, we're concentrating on the difficult cases and that's more of the commenting around that. But the other one is, and I'm sure Michelle covers this already, but it's how the need, because if we had all the money in the world, we'd have enough houses and all the rest of it, but we don't have either. Don't have the money, don't have all the houses we need. But how do we feed that back into the planning process with my other hat on? And especially where we're looking at working with housing associations on their builds and the other things. How do we build that back in to that process, so that we're preparing ourselves. Because I know if we're, from Michelle's role in the housing, you will know which houses you want to build and which ones you want to buy, but it's how we actually encourage our partners to do it as well, the housing association partners.
So I get involved with the early stages with the planning team when they are having those conversations about the types of properties that they are building. The discussions that happen in terms of, no, we don't want you to build these type of properties, we would prefer you to build them, I'm not necessarily involved with, but I put our point across in this is our housing need. With the registered providers, when they have got properties as at the end process, what we find is that they sometimes have policy agreements in place that say this person needs to be working, and we go back to them with those local lettings arrangements to say that doesn't meet our need. Yeah, if you're doing a development of 50 houses and we're going to get 50 houses that are of market rent, of social rent, then I agree that you need to be phasing them out, because you can't have a lot of complex people all in one place. That just doesn't work. But if you're looking at 5-6 properties, then we need to be looking at the people on through the allocations policy to do that. So we are involved with at the start and the end, and making sure that any new properties that we get do meet the need of the people on the register.
Oh, sorry. No, it's just one of the things to sort of say, reading the report and the presentation and this evening has actually, I've learned a lot from it. And it's maybe some thinking to go forward, because as a ward councillor, we get hit with a lot of these questions. So if we'd had some sort of more training at the beginning, or an annual update on this, just to look at it, it would help us be, as a ward councillor, be able to answer a lot more questions when we're sort of faced with it. So it's, I found it really, really useful.
Thank you. I think just on that point, that's really helpful feedback. And actually, the things that you're asked, and for us to then be aware of those and then be able to give you the guidance, or just those short, consistent answers, will hopefully help you in your roles, and will then reduce some of the need for queries, into the system as well. So we really welcome that. And actually, as you've been talking, that kind of need for a guide for members, FAQs for members, is becoming really, really apparent. But we don't know what we don't know. So we've learned a lot actually from your questions this evening as well. So thank you for that. I think just a couple of other points in terms of planning for the future. We'll not get into a planning debate this evening. But one of the things we need to be thinking about is, where are properties needed? What type of properties? How big are those properties? What does our population change look like? So we know that we have an aging population. We know that's going to be a challenge. We're having discussions about if we are to acquire homes in the future through the HRA or otherwise, how do we make sure that their homes fit for the future? Because, we know that people as they age are going to need different things in their homes, whether it's level access showers or wider doorways or whatever that might be. And that's on us to sort of take that step back and really think about, how do we make the best and the most from that? And one of the things that we've been doing also on the housing side, through our asset management plan, is trying to improve the properties that we have. So particularly at Gretton Court, around improved bathroom facilities, because that was not a housing choice for some time in all cases. And actually now we are in a much better position because of those changes. And now we're able to look at options to do that in another sheltered schemes. So we are always looking. We don't have the luxury of resources to do development and acquisition and things on a large scale. We have to make best use of the opportunities that we have. So again, really interesting policy area to get into the detail of, but it's really pleasing to hear that it's been helpful to sort of bring some of those insights, and we've certainly gained a lot. So thank you.
Councillor Lumley.
Just a few comments, really, quite briefly, really, because I know a lot of councillors have asked quite a lot of questions. Just, I think you always answered this, Rachel, actually, earlier on. I know one councillor asked this, but just a lot of feedback I get is that people want a council property over a private one because obviously the rent's a lot lower, and I get that so much. But I know you're doing a lot of work with others around that, and so are whoever's in power in government, and no doubt trying to solve that problem as well. can I just get clarification on when you actually meet in the panel, whoever you pick for that property, who wins the bid, how does that work? No, sorry, I know how it works, but who would ever, if someone's on so close together with their bid and their and all of their case file, who would get that property over somebody else? I think Councillor Thwaites asked that question briefly.
That's not done by the panel. The panel is for reviews to banding and eligibility. So when so the bid cycle opens on a Wednesday morning, closes on a Tuesday night. So then the system, we would put our things in saying this property, for instance, this property's got a level access shower. Who said they need which applicant has said they need a level access shower, and it would order the people who have put a bid on in the order based on their needs for that property. And then the system, and that's what the person would then see online. I know we've had issues with the front facing system of what customers see, but I'm confident now that that is right and that is accurate and has been for some time. So the properties then, what we then do is we would then do what we call a sense check to say on the top 3 and say, are these people still appropriate for this type of property? As what they said when they applied still relevant now? If it is, because we've done that, we've rang the person and said, right, do you want this property? Are they interested? Yeah. That's when they then move to a pre-tenancy assessment. So the pre-tenancy assessment is then checking again, do they meet the needs? Is there any information that has maybe gone under the radar? Can they afford that property? And then if all the boxes are ticked and everything is right, that's when they'd then be allocated the property. So it's not a case of on a Wednesday, somebody who's top, right, here's your keys to your property, you can move in next week. There's several checks done after that.
Because I know some people contact me, say they've actually won a bid and they've won that property, then they're waiting several weeks to be actually shown around the property. So that's, you just answered the question. Yeah, thanks for that, Rachel. Just quickly, Chair, briefly. Yeah, I've touched on that. Yeah, in terms of the actual local connection, could we just put something on the internet just to confirm what we mean by that? I personally, common sense point of view, we know what it means. It means I'm in the borough, but does it mean your aunt, uncle, mum, dad? Where does it end? Yeah, the sort of like cut-off point, if you like. And I think that might just really briefly, actually, I suppose, I mean, just out of interest, just quickly, with housing repairs, they're really good at the minute because we've got one officer who you contact. That person who's, I think her name's called, I can't remember her name now, she's really good. She replies back and she basically says, hi, Simon, I will look into this. I will get it to the relevant officer. That officer then contacts me, or that administrator comes back to me. It's a really good process a minute, about for a few months. When I contact housing options, it can sometimes be a bit slightly sort of like disjointed. If we could get a system like housing repairs have got, with that system, what they've got, that would be really good. But I know it's difficult, and I know you're trying your best.
Housing repairs have got a bit more of a luxury because I don't work a Friday, and one of my officers works 3 days a week, and then the others have only been, my system support officer isn't at a level where he can answer everything, and the other 2 have only been in post for a year. So it is largely me that would answer that, but I do endeavour to make sure that I answer all your queries as soon as I see them. So yeah, please be assured. But what I will also say is that if there is a query, I do know that the officers, Ollie, Jim and Michelle, will look into it and they'll contact the person. So what they might forget to do sometimes is contact you, but they will have contacted the customer to say, we've been contacted by Councillor Lumley or another councillor. What's your situation? What can we do?
Just a word of advice, Councillor Lumley. Stop using the word briefly because it's misleading. Councillor Gordon.
Yes, it's a question about the accommodation options during and after a review decision. Now, it says the applicant advised to accept the final offer of accommodation whilst the review is being considered. Now, which is okay. But the thing is, it will make them a little bit nervous, thinking if they've accepted it, then perhaps the review would sort of think, possibly it could be that they could keep that accommodation. But that's only, I know the council wouldn't do that, but or the decision maker wouldn't do that. But from their point of view, that's what they would think. And I was wondering, is there some sort of letter to guarantee that depending on the decision, that it's not a foregone conclusion? And this is from their point of view, not the council's or the decision maker.
Well, with that particular decision that you're talking about, I think that refers to the home when we've made a statutory offer of accommodation under a homeless duty. So that is guidance issued by Shelter. So that's that, and the reason we've put that in there is we're offering properties to people, and they're saying no, I don't want it. When we are offering properties, we are looking at whether that property is reasonable and is suitable for that particular household. So we're taking into account where is their employment, where's education needs, do they have any specific support needs that can't be met. So if somebody has a job in Melton, hasn't got a car, but we were going to be offering a 2-bed house in Stathern, for instance, would be saying that's they can't get back, or they've things like that. But what we advise is, because of the shortage of accommodation, that's why we say, please accept it, and then the review will be done by an independent officer. So the independent officer, it would be myself or would be Aisha, because I don't get involved in that decision making. That is down to the officer. And the reason for that is the 3 officers, yes, they have a framework and they have a guideline of how they would make decisions, because it's there in homeless statutory code guidance. But it is down to that independence and the knowledge of the officer. So our officers are now extremely experienced and have got a lot of knowledge on how to carefully make those decisions. They would make that decision of a property based on the needs of that person. So if they refuse that property, we would strongly be encouraging them to say, please don't refuse it, because you might not get offered anything else. If that review doesn't go their way, that person won't get another offer of a property, and they've got nowhere. They're either they could be stuck in a hostel, stuck with friends or family. So that's why we're saying, accept it. We'll judge the suitability of it. And it is that I'm looking at all those criteria as to why they're refusing that property, and then saying, and there's been a lot of occasions where I've said, no, I don't think that is a suitable offer. So somebody else can have that one. Let's move on to the next one. But there's also been times where I've said, I don't think that's a strong enough reason why they've refused it. There's no particular medical information. It's just because they don't like the area or like that street. And that's in a homeless offer, that is not a strong enough reason to refuse it. So that's why we do it, so that people do get somewhere and they're not just left. Because if they don't accept it at that point, if they don't get another one, it could be a long time before another one comes up.
Could they have some sort of guarantee in a letter to say, what you've just said, so that they know and that they've got peace of mind?
The letter does state, when they review it, it does state this will be looked by an independent officer, but we strongly encourage you to accept the property, but we would be looking at X, Y, and Z. And the letter I send out says, in part of my assessment, we invite them in. I either invite them in or I give them a ring to say, how would you prefer to do it? Would you do it face to face or on the phone? And we're looking at all the criteria of why they don't like that. The decision letter then goes out to say the criteria of which we've judged against and what their reasons were and why we've made that decision. So it is on there to say it is an independent person.
You say homelessness and you're saying letters.
Yeah.
How do you get a letter to a homeless person if they haven't got no fixed abode?
Well, a lot of people don't. A lot of the people that we get coming in as saying that are homeless do have a address, or they are staying somewhere. So when we're saying homeless, we're saying people who've got a Section 21 notice to quit their private rented property. So they might still be in there until they might just be hanging on in there till the bailiffs come, that sort of thing. The people that we're saying that there's very, very few rough sleepers, and there's very few people who don't have a contact address. So we would be giving them that letter in person and saying, if you haven't got a phone, if you haven't got an email address, you need to be coming in here every other day at 1 o'clock and giving them a time and saying, even if there's no updates, just come in so we can say there's no updates for you at this time, or there is an update. So we're making that contact with them.
Yeah, I mean, it's in essence the full term, I guess, is prevention of homelessness in terms of the service that it delivers. I also just wanted to go back to an earlier comment, Simon, about something around the local connection on the website. I think we will look at what we've got on the website and review it. What I would suggest is a little bit of caution, because what we don't want is the website then becoming a replication of the housing allocations policy, which is there anyway. And then when a website becomes too busy, it's actually counterproductive. So we will take away some of those suggestions away, but I think that's one of the things that we probably need to consider in that as well, that if it becomes busy, it's no use to anybody and people will be searching for those things, whereas perhaps we can look at different ways, adding a link to a frequently asked question, adding a link to the housing allocations policy, but then maybe adding how they can search for specific words that they don't understand, which is then included in that housing allocations policy. So yeah, is that right?
Councillor Sharp, the majority of homeless people do have somewhere where they can pick up mail and things like that, aid for benefits and things like that. But I have to say thank you to Rachel and her team, because just everybody I have sent that has been homeless or on the verge of homeless has been helped, and I deal a lot with the homeless people that come to Storehouse, and every single one has been found accommodation, sometimes temporary accommodation. Last year over Christmas, one of my ladies, and then found permanent accommodation just a couple of months ago, and things like that. So they really do work, even in one case where there was no direct link to Melton.
Questions or observations? No? Well, I'd like to extend thanks on behalf of the committee to Rachel, Aisha, Michelle, Adam, all committee members. I found it an incredibly informative and useful couple of hours. I've certainly learned quite a lot that I didn't know before, even though I'd read the report. I think the discussion we've had has been very illuminating. So thank you very much for tonight and for the work you do. I know it's a difficult area, and I could give you 10 minutes on the demise of social housing in Britain and what the real solution would be, because we're trying to meet a demand that we don't have necessarily the resources to address, but that's for another day. So I will bring the meeting to a close. Just one final observation from me, and it picks up on something that Simon referred to, and that's the crisis homeless charity. I would encourage you, if you want to use some of your council allowances to support a worthwhile cause. I do, and particularly at Christmas. But word of advice: don't do what I did and buy my 4 sons and other family members a place in a hostel for a person at Christmas and give it to them as a Christmas present on Christmas Day, because the reaction wasn't that exciting. Anyway, on that note, thank you for your attendance, and we close the meeting. Off. Yeah, lovely. Thank you.